Welcome to Versus. This is Spencer. Today we have a couple of card games. The first one is called OddVille. Now, OddVille is a worker placement game using cards where you're trying to build this city of OddVille using some different cards. These are the available ones that can be built, and here we start with a town square. On your turn, you have two choices. You have this deck of cards that you can choose actions, and everyone starts with the same 4 cards, and when you use a card, you can't use it again until it comes back into your hand. So for example, if I were to use this card, I couldn't use it again. I couldn't use this third card again until it's back into my hand, which comes later in the game. But on your turn, you can do one of two things. First thing you can do is play one of your cards and perform an action with the card. And the second thing you can do is actually build a building into the city. The cards let you do one of 3 things, which is split into these 3 different areas. First is you can obtain coins, and the interesting thing with these cards is they're used both as buildings, but also on the back of them is a coin symbol, because when you gain coins, you actually gain cards. They're just multifunctional. So if you were to play this card, you would obtain 2 coins. Or the second choice you can do is to get a resource, which is similar kind of to some worker placement. So if you were, for example, to obtain this brick, you would look on this resource board and you would place one of your workers on the lowest possible place for brick. In this case, there are no workers on brick, so if you were to pick this one, brick would be free. Now later, if the yellow player were to choose brick, because they perhaps need this brick, they would choose this card, they would take one of their little dudes, and they would put it on 1 coin. So they would actually have to pay a coin in order to have the ability to use brick. One person can go on 0, one can go on 1, and then as many players as want could go on 2 coins. The third thing they could do with these cards is they could obtain new buildings to build into the city later. So if they were to play this card, there are 6 buildings available at any time. If they were to play this card, the first 3 buildings are free, hence the green. The 4th, 5th, or 6th building costs money, 1, 2, or 3 coins each. So if they wanted, for some reason, to get this 4th building, and they played this card, they would have to pay 1 coin in order to obtain this building. So let's say they picked this building. They would put it here in front of them. They can only have as many as 2 at a time. These would shift down, and they would place a new card out. Instead of playing one of these action cards, what they can do, if they already have a building in front of them, they could play it here onto the city. So the city square is considered the topmost part of the city. You can never build above that. You have to, if there's a road, you have to connect by road, or you could connect here on the road. And in order to place this building, you have to have access to 2 brick and 1 of these gems. So this player, if they had 2 brick, they would then take off the 2 guys for brick, take off the 1 for gems, put them back into their pool, put the guy here, and then they would get some benefits. There's also these guilds which kind of break the rules in different ways, allowing you to switch your buildings or perhaps obtain resources when otherwise they wouldn't be able to. And so that's kind of a brief overview of OddVille. Spyrium is also kind of a worker placement card game where on your turn you are trying to build up some efficiencies in the way you're able to produce resources. The theme of Spyrium is you're in kind of this alternate universe of Victorian England where there is a resource called Spyrium which is produced, and you're trying to produce it in order to gain points and higher reputation around this track. And every round, there's 5 rounds, there are 9 different cards available. On your turn, you take one of your workers. They would be on your card, meaning they're available to place. You take one of your workers and you place your worker on the intersection of a card. So you would perhaps place it there. Then the green player would take her token and put it here, and it would go until you feel like you're done placing workers. There's reasons to keep some at home. When you're done placing workers, you then move your token over to this phase 2. So in phase 2, there's choices of either taking workers off the board, and then based on if you take them off, you can either get some money based on how many other workers are around specific cards. So if you wanted to let's say this worker was here, and this worker was here, then when you take a worker off, you choose a card he was next to. So we'll say this card, and there are 2 workers. So you can either get $2, or you can activate this card by paying $2, which there's also an extra cost in the top. And then you could take this card and you could add it kind of to your economic engine here, so to speak. And so in the future, you can use extra guys. I could then take a guy here to place him there, and he would then allow me to obtain one of these resources of Spyrium, which can be used later in the game for different reasons. It can be spent for points. It can be played for perhaps to help you get other items or different abilities. Also, we have these little chips, these little blue circles, which are used for different reasons. For example, this card here, when it was placed out, there is a little blue circle in the corner. So we would flip this over. It has the number 1. All of these tokens have either a 1, 2, or 3 on them. I would play it here, and that means when this card is purchased, they would get 1 victory point, since it has this universal symbol of victory points with the laurels around it. Another place where you would need to put one of those tokens is here on this card, and we would flip it over. We see it's a 3. That means when this card is activated, it costs £3. I say dollars because that's what everyone says. $3 to then move up a certain track, which is here. And there's different ways to activate different abilities. Essentially, these games are similar because they don't have really a main board, but they're both, lots of cards are involved. Here there's a deck of cards where you're building onto a city. Here there's a deck of cards where you're building out into this frame, a frame of 3x3 frame of cards that you're playing with. So you're kind of build a board here, and here you're using them to kind of build this city, maybe somewhat similar to Carcassonne style. Another similarity is the fact that there is some worker placement involved. If you place a worker in a certain area here on this resource board in OddVille, then other players cannot take that. Similarly in Spyrium, when you're placing workers, you're kind of you're making things either more expensive or you're making things inaccessible for other players if they don't have enough money. So those are some similarities. Both games I think are really enjoyable. Both games are unique in their own way and not necessarily something that I come across too often in my limited plays. Spyrium, I probably would say, is a better game. It's a little bit deeper, a little bit more in-depth with regards to strategies. OddVille is no slouch. It's also a very good game that you can have a lot of fun with multiple player counts. And in the end, I would definitely recommend trying both.